Of all the aspects of YouTube, the one that has to be the least talked about has to be the titles. But thumbnails are pretty close too. This is for a reason. Obviously, the videos themselves are the most important part. Hours upon hours of work are put into each and every one, so the thumbnail often just comes across as a second thought. Just slap some video assets in, or grab an image off of Google, and bada bing bada boom, you have a finished thumbnail. But then there are the people that are the exact opposite. It sometimes seems like people put more effort into making the thumbnail look polished than the actual video. And those are the kinds of things I'll be talking about today. Cause in this video, I'm going to explore the art of YouTube clickbait. While the term clickbait was coined in 2006, referring to misleading blog posts and online articles of the time, the act of misleading your audience originated much earlier on. Yellow journalism is the term used for the act of using eye-catching headlines for articles that have little to no legitimate research. Sounds familiar, right? And while the idea remains prevalent, the execution and extent to which clickbait can be effective has only increased, especially with YouTube. Ever since 2013, the ability to create custom thumbnails was available to the public, and you could see a clear and distinct change in how thumbnails were used by looking at an older channel and seeing how their thumbnails evolve over time. When I think of old school YouTube, I think of Smosh, and looking at their older thumbnails, you could see that once they were available, the main thing they used seemed to be a colored background with something in the foreground. But the more successful videos seem to be the ones that use sex appeal. Basically, by having a woman show some cleavage in the thumbnail, the video would magically seem to do better, even though there was nothing of the sort in the actual videos themselves. Comparing these to thumbnails today, you could clearly see that respectable channels try to at least show something relating to the video, even if the video doesn't actually play out like the thumbnail might suggest. But clickbait thumbnails have actually been around longer than customizable thumbnails. Ever since YouTube was founded, thumbnails worked by selecting one of 3 images from your video, and you just have to hope that one of those 3 looks good enough to click on. But by adding a pre-existing image directly into the video, it becomes possible to have that image as the thumbnail. Fun fact, there are a lot of YouTube videos out there, and there are even more popping up each and every day. With this new increase in competition, it only makes sense to do whatever you can to make sure people will want to watch what you make over anyone else. The thumbnail is your first introduction to a video or channel, and a lot of the time, it's your only introduction. So, to get this out of the way, what exactly counts as clickbait? The dictionary definition is pretty terrible, since getting attention and views is the entire goal of YouTube, regardless of clickbait. So for this video, I'll be using my own definition, which would be a thumbnail featuring something that isn't in the video or is clearly exaggerated with the purpose of making it seem like it's what the video actually is. Some non-examples would be custom artwork or a collage of video assets. As you can clearly see that these thumbnails aren't trying to show you what's in the actual video, but rather what the video is about. That's probably one of the most interesting things about thumbnails. You only have a 1280 by 720 pixel size to encapsulate the message or meaning of your entire video, and you have to make every single one of those pixels count. I like this one. The level of clickbait found in videos is on a spectrum. On one end, you're nowhere near clickbait. In fact, thumbnails here are usually too boring to even be worth clicking on. And on the other hand, you get something straight up misleading, which results in the audience feeling that they were lied to. Getting people to watch a singular video is pretty easy. A decent idea and some good luck is really all you'll need for that. But turning those short-term views into longer-term success takes a whole other set of skills. When it comes to clickbait, there's a fine line between an interesting thumbnail and a flat-out lie. I think that this thumbnail by Mr. Beast walks that line as closely as possible. While the title is technically telling the truth, albeit a little hyperbolized, the plane crashed in the woods and not the ocean like the thumbnail suggests. And the video itself is mostly just Jimmy and the boys hanging out in the woods. Whether it's clickbait or not is still up for debate, since he did actually crash a plane in the video. But either way, we all have to agree that it's at very least a compelling thumbnail. Something to keep in mind is that a pleasing image doesn't automatically equate to a good thumbnail. This video essay I made a few months ago didn't do as well as any of the videos around it. There are plenty of potential reasons for that, but a plausible one is that the thumbnail didn't look appealing enough to click on. So how do you make your thumbnail stand out without straight up lying? Well, here are a few things you can do. A lot of channels have their face with a shocked expression on the side of the screen. And while that works for recognizability and branding, this can only work if people already know what you look like. So if you're an up-and-coming YouTuber, there's not really a reason to add your face to a thumbnail, since it's a waste of space. Using a facial expression for branding could also get pretty annoying. I'm not sure if it's just me, but the MrBeast Gaming and React thumbnails reusing the exact same 2 or 3 pictures just doesn't look very good. Saturating the colors can also make your thumbnail stand out. A lot of channels do this, but by having more visible colors, you can have a thumbnail attract more attention. One more thing I'll suggest is to always use something a viewer can recognize in your thumbnail. If you're talking about a video game, use the most popular character from that game. There's an interesting discrepancy I found with clickbait as a topic. When people critique someone's content, a lot of people point to a YouTuber clickbaiting as if it were something damning. But here's the thing, those same people criticizing others for clickbaiting are doing it themselves. And the answer to why is pretty simple. It works. Clickbait as a whole isn't necessarily a bad thing either. In the modern landscape of YouTube, it's not uncommon for a thumbnail to have a more interesting recreation of what's actually in the video. Go to almost any YouTuber and you'll see exactly what I mean. The thumbnails are usually designed from the ground up to ensure a video will be successful, whether that means implementing red arrows or doing a face like this on the side of the screen. Speaking of red arrows, there's a pretty simple reason as to why a lot of people would choose to use them. Obviously, the clickbait red arrow or the red circle are used to point towards something that may not be noticeable, but the reason they're used so heavily all comes down to how we respond to the color red. Red is the color of blood, and it's used in all sorts of warnings. So we as a society have all come to accept that red is a color we should pay attention to. Red is also the most vibrant color, so of all colors, your eyes would be gravitated towards the color red. While I seem to be defending the use of clickbait quite a lot in this video, there is another, more mischievous side of the spectrum. Some uses of clickbait are so bad that they end up being straight up scummy. JStation would do this sort of thing all the time, like calling Mac Miller an XXX Tentacion after they both passed, and then proceeding to add a red circle and make a funny face. But thumbnails aren't the only thing that have clickbait. As I said earlier, this all started with news articles, and without images, they were limited to titles. There are quite a few ways to make an enticing title. You could capitalize the words and add some adjectives, but the most interesting method I've seen is to portray a question. People tend to click on the video to either get an answer to it or to give an answer of their own. Sometimes a video can be considered clickbait without that even being intentional. For example, a lot of people really detested the fact that my 20-minute Plants vs. Zombies retrospective only answers the title question after I go through the full history of the game, with the question being answered in the last 30 seconds of the video. The same sort of feeling came from my video about Voodoo's repetitive mobile games. People were going in expecting to see a commentary style video of me tearing apart the company, not knowing that I was actually reviewing the games themselves. Even unintentionally, clickbaiting is something hard to get right. Everyone has a different threshold on what counts as misleading. Clickbait is something we all just have to live with, and it's not going to change anytime soon. But I think a YouTuber's thumbnail design is something really interesting to see. The vast majority of YouTubers aren't expert graphic designers, so it's interesting to see people's different takes and attempts at solving the same problem, as well as seeing the style of their thumbnails. I recommend taking a good look at your favorite YouTubers' thumbnails to see what they do.
And then there's just Critical using a stretched out screenshot from the video.